He grabbed his machete and quietly made his way to Adora's room. She was already awake, sitting up in bed with wide, frightened eyes. "I heard it too," she whispered. Chinedu nodded and motioned for her to stay quiet. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing, but then there was a shadow, a figure standing just beyond the edge of the light, watching the house. Chinedu's heart pounded in his chest as he opened the door slowly, stepping out into the night. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. Chinedu tightened his grip on the machete and took a step forward. "Who is there?" he called out, his voice firm. The figure didn't respond, but Chinedu could sense a dark presence, something malicious. He took another step forward, but in that moment, the figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving only silence behind. It was a stormy evening in the small village of Umuokpara. The sky was dark and the rain poured down in torrents, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Chinedu, a young man in his late 20s, was on his way back from the farm, trying to find shelter from the rain. As he hurried down the narrow path, he heard a cry faint for help. Curiosity piqued him. Chinedu stopped and strained to hear over the sound of the rain. The cry came again, this time clearer. He followed the sound, which led him to an old hut, barely standing on the edge of the village. The door was ajar, and inside, Chinedu found an elderly woman lying on a mat, struggling to breathe. "Mama, are you okay?" Chinedu asked, rushing to her side. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at Chinedu with a mixture of relief and desperation. Her voice was weak as she spoke. You came?" she whispered. "Please, I have little time left. Promise me you'll take care of my daughter, Adora." Chinedu hesitated, shocked by the sudden request. He didn't know this woman, nor did he know her granddaughter, but something in her eyes compelled him to agree. "I promise, Mama," Chinedu said softly. The woman sighed in relief, her grip on Chinedu's hand loosening. With her last breath, she whispered, "Keep her safe from him." Then she was gone. Chinedu sat there for a moment, stunned. Who was this woman? Who was him? And what danger was Adora in? His mind raced with questions, but he knew one thing for sure. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The rain had stopped by the time Chinedu left the hut. He was shaking, but he knew he had to find Adora. The village was small, so it didn't take time for him to locate her. Adora was a beautiful young woman, around 18 years old, with a kind smile that hid the sadness in her eyes. She lived alone, tending to the small farm her grandmother had left behind. Chinedu approached her cautiously, unsure of how to break the news. "Adora," he began, his voice gentle. I am sorry, but your grandmother, she's passed away Adora froze, the hoe she was holding slipping from her hands. She turned to Chinedu, her eyes wide with shock. No, that can't be true, she whispered, shaking her head. I just saw her this morning. Chinedu stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. I am sorry, Adora. She asked me to look after you. She said I someone you need to be kept safe from. Do you know who she was talking about? Adora stared at him, her face pale. I don't know. She never mentioned anyone. But there is something strange. Sometimes at night, I feel like someone is watching me. I've heard footsteps outside my window, but when I look, there is no one there. Chinedu's heart raced. There was more to this than he had thought. He had to find out who this mysterious figure was and why Mama Adora had been so worried. The next few nights were tense for Chinedu and Adora. Chinedu had moved into the small guest room in Adora's house, determined to keep his promise. Every night, he stayed up late, listening for any unusual sounds. He kept a machete by his side, just in case. One night, as the village slept under the light of a full moon, Chinedu heard something. It was faint at first, a soft rustling, like leaves brushing against each other. But then it grew louder, and Chinedu realized it was the sound of footsteps, cautious and deliberate. He grabbed his machete quietly and made his way to Adara's room. She was already awake, sitting up in bed with frightened eyes. I heard it too, she whispered. Chinedu nodded and motioned for her to stay quiet. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first it was nothing, but then there was a shadow, a figure standing just beyond the edge of the light, watching the house. Chinedu's heart pounded in his chest as he opened the door slowly. Stepping out into the dark, the figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. Chinedu tightened his grip on the machete and took a step forward. Who is there? He called out, his voice firm. The figure didn't respond, but Chinedu could sense a dark presence, something malicious. He took another step forward, but in that moment, the figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving only silence behind. Chinedu stood there for a long time, his heart racing, before finally returning to the house. Adora was waiting for him, her face pale with fear. What was it? She asked. I don't know, Chinedu replied, his voice tense, but I'll find out. The encounter left both of them shaking, but it also strengthened Chinedu's resolve. Whoever or whatever was out there, he will not let it harm Adora. The next evening, Chinedu decided to seek help from the village elder, Nze Ikenna, a wise man known for his knowledge of the village's history and its secrets. Chinedu explained everything, the promise he made, the strange figure watching Adora, and the fear that hung over them like a dark cloud. Nze Ikenna listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. When Chinedu finished, the elder sighed deeply. There is a story, one that few in the village remembered. Nze Ikenna began. Many years ago, there was a man named Obinna. He was a powerful man, but also a dangerous one. He was obsessed with a woman, Nneka, who was the most beautiful girl in the village. But Nneka didn't love him. She was in love with another. In his rage, Obinna turned to dark forces, trying to bend Nneka to his will. The Ikenna paused, his eyes distant as he recalled the old story. But Nneka's love for her true husband was strong, and together they fought back against Obinna's dark magic. Obinna was defeated, but before he died, he cursed the village, vowing that he would return one day to claim what he believed was rightfully his. Since then, there have been whispers of his spirit haunting the village, waiting for the right moment to strike. Chinedu felt a chill run down his spine. Do you think this has something to do with Adora? Nze Ikenna nodded gravely. It is possible. If Obinna's spirit believes that Adora belongs to him in some way, he will not stop until he has her. You must be vigilant, Chinedu. Protect her at all costs. Chinedu left the elder's house with a heavy heart. The story was terrifying, but it also gave him a sense of purpose. He had promised to protect Adora, and now he knew what he was up against. But how could he fight a spirit that had waited decades to exact its revenge? Chinedu decided that he needed more information if he was going to protect Adora from the dark force. He returned to Mama Adora's old hut, hoping to find some clue about the danger that threatened them. The hut was just as he had left it, the air inside still carrying the scent of rain. Chinedu carefully searched through the few belongings Mama Adora had left behind. He found old clothes, cooking utensils, and a few worn-out books, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. As he was about to give up, he noticed something strange. Beneath the mat, where Mama Adora had passed away, there was a loose floorboard. His heart raced as he pried it open, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied together with a faded red ribbon. Chinedu carefully untied the ribbon and began to read the letters. They were addressed to Mama Adora, but they were unsigned. The letter spoke of a deep love, but also of fear and regret. The writer mentioned a powerful man who had wronged them, someone who had cursed their family. As Chinedu read on, he realized that the letters were from Nneka. Chinedu continued to read the letters, his heart pounding with each revelation. The letters were from Nneka, Adora's great-grandmother, who had been in love with another man but was pursued relentlessly by Obinna. The letters described how Obinna had cursed her and her descendants, vowing to return one day to claim what he believed was his. The final letter was the most chilling. Nneka wrote that she had a vision of Obinna's spirit returning to haunt her family. She warned that one day, one of her descendants will be in grave danger, and the only way to break the curse was through a silent promise made by someone who truly cared for the endangered one. Chinedu realized with a start that he was the one who had made that promise. He had promised Mama Odora to protect her granddaughter, and now it was up to him to break the curse. But how could he break a curse that had been in place for generations? And what did it mean to keep a silent promise? Chinedu knew he needed to find more answers, but time was running out. That night, Chinedu and Adora barely slept. The atmosphere in the house was tense, and every creak and rustle seemed ominous. Chinedu kept the machete by his side, determined to protect Adora at all costs. Around midnight, they heard it again, the sound of footsteps outside the window. Chinedu sprang to his feet. Gripping the machete tightly, Adora followed him, her face pale with fear. They moved to the window, and once again they saw the shadowy figure standing in the distance. This time, however, the figure moved closer, stepping into the moonlight. Chinedu could see it more clearly now. A tall, menacing man with a face twisted in anger. "Who are you?" Chinedu demanded, stepping outside. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond, but its eyes locked on Adora, who was standing behind Chinedu. The look in its eyes was one of possession, as if Adora belongs to it. Without warning, the figure lunged towards Adora, moving with unnatural speed. Chinedu swung the machete, but it passed through the figure as if it were made of smoke. The figure stepped inches from Adora, its hand reaching out to touch her. But just as its hand was about to make contact, the figure recoiled, letting out an eerie piercing scream. It disappeared into the night, leaving Chinedu and Adora shaking and confused. "What was that?" Adora whispered, trembling. "I don't know," Chinedu replied, his voice steady. "But whatever it is after you, and I won't let it take you." The next morning, Chinedu and Adora went to see Nze Ikenna. Chinedu explained what had happened the previous night, and the elder listened with growing concern. "The spirit is growing stronger," Nze Ikenna said gravely. "It is feeding off Adora's fear and your determination to protect her. But there is still hope. You mentioned a silent promise. That promise is the key to breaking the curse." "But I don't understand what the silent promise means," Chinedu said, frustrated. "How can I keep a promise when I don't even know what it is?" Nze Ikenna thought for a moment, then nodded. "The promise must be something that can only be fulfilled in silence. Something that requires no words, only action. It is possible that the promise is tied to an act of selflessness, something that can only be done by someone who truly cares for Adora."